Victorian authorities must take swift action to dismantle a camp set up by Indigenous activists in King's Domain. Prominent activist Robbie Thorpe, the uncle of Senator Lidia Thorpe, is among those who have set up a camp in the inner city park and vowed to remain there until their demands are met and the area is handed over to the Indigenous community. Now, let's get one thing clear. King's Domain is for all Victorians. Always was, always will be. Or at least it should be, unless we are betrayed by milquetoast politicians desperate to appease the unappeasable. Victoria Police must remove the activists as they will remove any other group. How long do you think you or I would last if we pitched a tent and started a fire in the middle of the Botanic Gardens or in Royal Park? These activists are demanding King's Domain be renamed and handed to the Indigenous community, with Mr Thorpe vowing to remain in the park until his demands are met. He said, "We want to call it Camp Sovereignty, or its proper name, Yalukit Willem. We're the proper custodians. The land needs us and we need our land. If we don't win here, we've got nothing to go to. Where do you go for a dose of Aboriginal culture close to the CBD?" Well, there are plenty of options, Mr Thorpe, including the Bunji Laka Aboriginal Cultural Centre at Melbourne Museum, thanks to the largesse of Victorian taxpayers. That would be the same taxpayers that activists claim are living on stolen land. The same Victorians who voted against further racial division in rejecting the voice. Australia voted in October and the verdict was emphatic. In every single state and territory, with the exception of the out-of-touch bureaucratic class that makes up the ACT, every single state voted against the racial division and privilege the voice represented. Australians don't want a country where your ethnicity determines your rights and entitlements. Last week, we saw protesters in New South Wales, including a number of Indigenous Australians, call on the New South Wales government to remove climbing bans and to properly investigate claims over Mount Warning, after a 2023 report claimed the mountain played a sacred and spiritual role in local Indigenous culture. In New South Wales alone, there are more than 40,000 outstanding Aboriginal land claims, including for prime waterside land. It would be wrong to assume that the actions taken by Mr Thorpe and other radicals is supported by all Indigenous Australians. But too often that is the simplistic view offered by the media, who uncritically accept and regurgitate whatever tripe the activist class feeds them, whether it's mangling the English language to avoid using gendered pronouns or adopting political terms like First Nations. Our institutions have been corrupted by the excesses of far-left ideology with its poisonous oppressor and oppressed narrative. It is evident in academia, government bodies, the bulk of the media, and increasingly the corporate world. To see the likes of Woolworths and Tennis Australia and AFL clubs continue to push divisive racial politics on Australia Day was disappointing but not surprising. But there needs to be a cost associated with this activism, the sort of cost Bud Light and more recently Rip Curl have paid for their daft virtue signalling on trans issues. Corporates are free to opine on all sorts of contentious social and political issues, but the consumer is also free to make purchasing decisions in response to that activism. And who can blame consumers for not wanting to hand over their hard-earned to companies that hate their values? There are plenty of other companies that will happily take your money without pushing their toxic ideology down your throat.